I'm very excited to be partnering with Climate Exchange for their 10th annual EV raffle. That's right, they've been doing this for 10 years now. Each year, the team at Climate Exchange lets their grand prize winner choose from any EV on the market of their choice, and for their 10-year milestone, they've decided to sweeten the pot. There's actually going to be 2 separate raffles this year to give you the ultimate freedom of choice. If you're looking for a top-of-the-line vehicle like a Rivian or a Lucid, Mercedes, etc., the luxury raffle lets you choose any EV on the market up to $120,000. If luxury is not really your thing, but you still want a great EV, there's going to be a more affordable mini raffle where you get to choose any EV on the market up to $45,000. Since they believe that winning should come with no strings attached, they also cover all taxes on all the EVs that they give away. To sweeten the deal even more, on the luxury raffle, there's going to be 2 additional prizes. The second place winner gets a $12,500 cash prize, and the third place winner gets a $7,500 cash prize. And even better yet, if you enter into the luxury raffle early by October 30th, they're going to do a bonus drawing on October 31st where there's a $10,000 cash prize. Climate Exchange is a nonprofit organization that helps states put policies into place that make meaningful progress towards solving climate change, whether that be helping with EV adoption, building electrification infrastructure, or implementing public charging. Their work is now more important than ever, so please consider supporting this cause while also giving yourself the chance to win a great EV. Visit the link in the description. Now let's get back to the video.
Howdy folks, welcome back to another Out of Spec Renew video. I'm actually doing this intro after the fact of the repair, so we're a little bit out of order here. But this right here is a 2019 Model 3. It's actually a long-range dual motor variant, although that doesn't really matter so much for the context of this particular repair. This actually had an issue with the coolant connector, one of them on the front of the battery. There's 4 of these on the front portion of the battery, and on both Model 3 and Model Y, they're actually pretty susceptible to becoming damaged from road debris if you, say, run over something. And that's exactly what happened in the case of this car. This particular coolant connector is actually one of the center ones. So there's one on each corner, and then there's 2 more kind of in the middle. This is actually one of the center ones. It didn't actually break the coolant pathway through the connector, but it did break the base plate for it right there where it actually connects to the battery. As far as Tesla's concerned, their only fix for a problem like this is to replace the whole battery. I think a remanufactured battery for this car, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of around $12,000 plus or minus. I don't know what Tesla's exact pricing is on these days, but it's astronomically high. So yeah, I was able to drop the battery out, open it up, replace the coolant fitting for a fraction of that cost. And now this car is once again back on the road, and hopefully the owners will get many more years of use out of it. And yeah, so fairly straightforward repair, but it's a pretty complicated process since the battery does have to come apart. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's get into it. So to start things off here, let's go ahead and take a look inside the car. Now, I actually drove this car into the shop. It previously went to the service center. They disconnected the 12-volt battery and the connector on the battery pack underneath, which is kind of used as a service loop for these. So it was completely dead when it arrived. I was able to power it back up, drive it into the shop, no problems. It's been sitting in here for, I don't know, maybe an hour, 2 hours, something like that. I've been inundated with phone calls today, so not super productive this morning. But if we go ahead and get the car opened up here, we can actually go and view our service alerts. So you can see we've got some external isolation alerts, which were not there when I first powered up the car. So we'll have to do some investigation on that. That's a little bit more than, there's a little bit more to this story than what I originally anticipated. But essentially what happened here is that this customer ran over some road debris and damaged the coolant lines on the front of the battery. Now, they were told by the service center that it broke some of the coolant fittings off of the battery itself, and this is a well-known problem for these cars, especially on the earlier ones that just have this sort of fabric undershield, which you can see is all kind of torn apart down there. Well, You can't see it. So let's grab a light. There you go. So you can see that fabric sort of skid plate undershield is all torn up. We can also see that the metal skid plate piece on the front of the battery here is also torn right there. So I'm wondering if our isolation fault might be due to one of the cables in here being damaged. You can also see that that coolant line is busted in half. So I don't know if it's just our coolant lines that are broken or the coolant fittings on the battery itself. So we'll have to do some investigation of that. You can see we've got a pretty decent sized puddle of coolant here. And there's probably not much of any coolant left in the car other than just what's sitting in there. But my big worry when I saw this isolation fault was that there may have been coolant that leaked into the battery, causing a loss of isolation. But if we go back to our high voltage tab here, well, it's not showing it now, but if I try and get the car booted up, what it's doing now is it's closing one contactor at a time and checking the isolation on both the positive and negative sides of the high voltage system. So it's checking one contactor now, then it'll open that one and close another one. It'll go through its isolation checks, but when it's all finished, it'll give us an internal isolation reading, which is the isolation inside of the battery pack. And it's measuring almost 10 mega ohms of internal isolation. Or, I mean, it's probably just maxed out for its value. Yeah, see, internal 9910K, so that's over 9 mega ohms. So that's pretty solid for internal isolation. That's well within the realm of what we would want to see. So it does seem like it's an external loss of isolation. If we go back to our faults here, let's see, I want to see this one. So you can see it's actually spitting out some values here. So it's saying our negative side is 4420, so that's going to be 4,420,000 ohms. So that's 4.4 mega ohms, where the positive side is only 620,000 ohms. They don't actually have the units listed here, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's saying there. We can plug in with Toolbox and see what values it's actually reporting there for that. But it does look like we're looking at an external loss of isolation. So let's go ahead and get the car up in the air here and assess the damage, see what we're really looking at, and see whether or not any of the coolant fittings on the front of the battery are damaged, or if it's just some of the coolant lines and perhaps some cables, and we'll go from there. All right, before we get the car in the air, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect our 12-volt battery and stuff. I just had my power supply on here to keep the battery from dying since we don't have any high voltage system support. So we'll disconnect that. And actually, I made a mistake. We need that connected still because we have to open this door. And actually, we'll go ahead and open the other rear one too, just in case, since we can't open those with the car powered down. Now we'll go ahead and disconnect that. And then we can disconnect our high voltage connector. Well, not high voltage, but it's our low voltage connector on the battery, which kind of acts as our service loop disconnect. So we've got that undone. I'll go ahead and get the car up in the air here, and we can assess the damage. All right, so we've got our car up in the air here, and first impressions actually are better than I anticipated. I think I found our loss of isolation there. So if we look, you can see that cable right there is damaged. So these have a ground shielding on them. So the ground shielding is probably actually touching the conductor in there that's causing our loss of isolation. It looks like that one might also be damaged right there. The coolant fitting situation is better than I expected. I don't think the coolant fittings on the battery are actually damaged. It looks like it's just this hose that got split apart right here. The actual fittings on the battery itself, so we've got one here, seem intact. All the other ones that I can see, I kind of gave them a little bit of a wiggle here. They all look like they're intact. So I'll probably pull the skid plate off here, what's left of it, and probably peel the fender. I don't think anything behind here is damaged, but this can be a pretty common area for damage, is if something gets sucked up into the wheel, it'll actually damage the coolant fitting that's behind the inner fender liners here. So I'll probably peel both of those back, take this off. We'll do a little bit of a closer inspection, see what we're looking at. And this customer may have gotten lucky. We might not actually have to replace the coolant fittings on this, which I was kind of almost hoping for that for the video, but in this particular case, it's probably going to save this customer quite a bit of money because we won't have to drop the pack to replace those if they're not damaged. So anyway, I'll get this torn apart. We'll take a closer look. All right, so I got our little skid plate piece that goes on the front of the battery there off. That thing's pretty bent up, as you can see. Of course, I got that off as well. Taking a closer look under here, there's no damage to the corners. That's good. I didn't really think there was going to be any because the fender liners looked like they were in good shape. But upon closer inspection, this coolant fitting is indeed damaged. I don't know how well that shows up on camera. I'll try and zoom it in. Maybe. You can kind of see it, but that fitting is definitely cracked. So, unfortunately, I guess the customer didn't get as lucky as I initially thought, and that fitting is going to have to be replaced. This one I think is fine. I don't see any problems there. We'll have to do a little bit of a closer inspection on it. But yeah, we definitely have a busted coolant fitting, so I guess it does make the video more interesting, but sucks for the customer because we are indeed going to have to drop the pack and replace that, especially since the fitting is broken way back inside there. Somewhere here I have a replacement fitting. So this right here is what the replacement fitting looks like, and the old one is cracked. Let me get the light facing down here. So the old one is cracked right along this edge, basically. So we're gonna have to swap that out. The only way to swap this is to do it from the inside because it mounts on the back side internally in the pack. So we'll have to drop the pack, open up the lid, unbolt that thing, and swap it out with the new one. I have seen in some cases what people do on these fittings, if it's just broken on the outside, is they'll reattach it with like a pipe nipple or something. I don't like that. For one, there's a number of different issues with that. One, you can crack the fitting internally and cause an internal coolant leak, which is obviously a big deal. I actually have a pack sitting outside my shop right now that had that exact thing happen on it. They attempted to repair it and caused an internal coolant leak, which destroyed the battery entirely. The other thing that happens is even if you can complete that repair successfully without damaging the inside of the fitting, is it restricts the coolant flow to whichever modules it is that you do that on. If you use like a plastic pipe fitting, it actually restricts the cross-sectional area of this tube down by basically 50%. And even if you use a brass one, it's still going to be, a 25 or 30% reduction in cross-sectional area. And that means reduced cooling for that brick, which could lead to thermal issues if you do, any kind of road tripping or lots of fast charging or anything like that. And the inverse of that would be preconditioning. So if it's cold out, it also might not be able to heat up that module as well due to reduced coolant flow with less cross-sectional area. So while it's a cheap kind of bodge repair that maybe can get you back on the road, it's pretty risky because you risk damaging the fitting internally and causing even bigger problems. Or, it obviously restricts coolant flow. So the proper way to do it is to actually replace the whole fitting, and that's what we're going to be working on this car. So I'm gonna go ahead and start getting ready to do the prep work to drop this pack out. I already have a whole nother video showing a pack swap on a Model 3, so we're probably not gonna go too into detail on the process of dropping the pack. I'll probably just show you a few snippets here and there. But once the pack is out, we'll work on getting it opened up and we can start on the big stuff. Okay, folks, it's a new day here. I've got everything prepped underneath the car to pull the pack. Everything that needs to be disconnected is disconnected, both underneath the car as well as up inside. Like I said before, if you want to see more detail into the actual pack removal and installation process, I've got a whole video showing that for Model 3 where we did an LFP pack swap here in the shop. But I'm going to go ahead and get this thing dropped out, and then we can go ahead and get started on actually opening up the lid and starting on the repairs to replace our fitting right there. Okay, we've got the battery fully unbolted and disconnected. We've got all the fasteners out on the sides. Everything's disconnected, so we're ready to go ahead and pick this thing up. So I'll just give it a couple little jolts here. Make sure we're fully off and that we're not hanging up. Looks like we're good. All right, pack is out. Now comes the hard part. So the pack is out of the car here. Of course, we've got our broken fitting here at the front that's going to get replaced. First thing we need to do before we can pull the lid off is we need to pull all of our power electronics stuff out of the Penthouse here. So inside here, we've got the PCS. We've got our fast charge contactors, some bus bars, the HVP, which is the battery pack controller, and a few other assorted things. Once we get all that stuff pulled out, we have a few other things to unplug that connect down to the actual sense boards on either end. And then from there, we can start disassembling the rest of the lid. It's just got some fasteners around the periphery. And of course, it's, glued in with this adhesive silicone. So go ahead and get this opened up and start pulling everything out of there. It might be easier for me to get this on the ground to pull the PCS and everything out, but I might put it back on the table to pull the actual lid off. Okay, so I've put the battery back down on the ground just to make it a little bit easier working height to get the PCS and stuff out of here. But as you can probably see, I've actually cleaned up the lid. I've also removed all of the coolant lines and labeled where they go. The only two that are really have to be labeled are the two on this side because there's an upper and a lower. But yeah, that's all that stuff off. We've got to go ahead and pull some of these screws out of the lid here. So we've got two here, and then we've got two at our connector. That's it for all those. And then to pull the rest of the lid off, switch sockets here. I've just got a bunch of fasteners here around the periphery that will zip out of here. And once we get all these out, be able to pull the lid off and start disassembling everything inside. Okay. We hung up somewhere. Oh, I missed one. These early packs have more fasteners on this lid than later ones do. All right. There we go. So now under here, we've got our HV system controller, or HVP, whatever you want to call it. Underneath that, the big silver box here, that's our PCS. So that acts as both the DC to DC converter as well as the onboard charger for the car. We've got a few other things in here that we'll have to pull out. We've got our high voltage pyro fuse right here. We'll have to disconnect the connections on the input side of the contactors, so the battery side. We'll also need to pull out our charge port connector and our fast charge contactors. And then I think that's most of the stuff that we need to take out. There might be a couple of other little things that I'm missing there. But I'm going to go ahead and work on getting all this stuff unplugged and removed. And then once I get all that out, we should be good to go. All right, I've got all the connectors fully disassembled on the bottom here. So these just pop off. It's just, once the bolts are out, it's just this kind of little ground shield plane that holds it in. It's got a bunch of little clips in it. This one, you can actually pull the whole connector out with this attached, and then it's just got one little clip on the back and the front there that pull that one off. This one's actually the easiest of the three. Before we go taking the lid off, I actually want to fix this little bent lip on the front of the battery here, where whatever it was that they hit kind of impacted and dented it. So I'm going to try and straighten that out, and then we'll start pulling the lid off. Okay, so we've got our little dented portion of the lid here. I've just clamped a piece of square tube on here. I was going to try and just clamp it down, but I don't think I can quite get enough force there. So I'm just going to use a dead blow, and we'll try and straighten that out. Okay, we're making progress. I might transfer over to a wooden block with a metal hammer, but I'll try and give this a couple more good whacks. Yeah, we'll try the wooden block trick here. All right, I think I can apply a little bit more force this way. That's actually done a pretty decent amount of progress there. So I'll keep working at this until it's nice and straight, and then we'll actually get the lid off here. Okie dokie, so our spot right here is where it was dented up. We're basically perfectly straight there, or at least as straight as we could possibly be. So that's perfect. Now we're ready to go ahead and start actually removing all the fasteners to get this lid off. So the first step to get the lid off here is we need to take out all of our fasteners in the center area. So we've got these 4 big nuts that go down through the center. These are just big 24 millimeter hex. Then we've also got these fasteners. These are actually where the bolts go through the floor in the interior of the cart and bolt into the top of the battery. These are all, they use an Allen hex to remove. So the rear 3 are all 8 millimeter hex, and the 2 on each side at the front here are 10 millimeter hex. So I'm going to go ahead and get all this stuff out, and then we'll go around the periphery to take out all the fasteners on the edges, and then we can start cutting through the adhesive to get the lid off of the pack enclosure. All right, so all the fasteners are removed from the center portion of the lid. You can see when these are off just how flimsy this lid is. It's real thin sheet metal. I also forgot to mention that there are a few fasteners in the rear penthouse area here that had to be removed. So we've got those 2 there, 2 more right there, and then there's 2 more that actually hold in the fast charge contactors. The contactor assembly doesn't have to come out, but the bolts go all the way through the contactor assembly there and there. So we've got all that stuff out. There were also a couple more on the rear here that have to be undone. Now all that's left to do is to get all the ones out around the perimeter. And then once that's finished, we'll be able to cut through the top of the lid to get it open. So all the bolts are removed from the perimeter of the pack here. The next step is to basically peel this thing open. Normally I would use like an oscillating multi-tool with a blade on it. Unfortunately, my multi-tool is broken, so I'm going to be doing this the manual way. Basically, we're going to wedge my tool in here, work it all the way around the edges. The hard part is getting around these curved portions, but if with a thin enough tool like this, it'll kind of bend enough that you can get it up in there, going from both directions to get it separated. Obviously, there are battery modules in here that we don't want to hit, so we don't want to be pushing anything in there too far. But the way that this lid is set up, you'd have to try pretty hard to hit anything. The biggest risk area is on this section where it goes up on both the front and the back, but on the bottom and on the top, you're pretty safe, because over here you're actually above the modules, and right here you're kind of right at the very base level of the modules, but they actually have There's sort of a, I don't know the right way to describe it, but the modules are bolted onto standoffs on here. So it's actually sitting slightly above, and there's actually other stuff that you'd hit before actually hitting the modules in there. And there's also a lot of space here on the corners. The module only comes to probably about here. So there's a lot of empty space in the front portion here, even if you did push something in here too far. But still want to be careful. Obviously, we do have a live battery here, so I'm going to go ahead and get to pulling this off, and I'll bring you guys back when we're ready to pull the lid off of this thing. All right, I've worked all the way around the lid, got all the fasteners off, and this thing is ready to lift off. So my dad's going to give me a hand here. We're going to go ahead and lift the lid off of this thing. And boom, there we go. We got the lid off the pack. We can see all the modules. Now we should be able to swap out our busted coolant fitting there, and then it'll just be reassembly. All that work just to replace one broken coolant fitting. Let's get to it. All right, so this right here is our fitting that's broken. I don't know how well you can see it on camera, but there's a crack through the housing right here. You can probably see it. And you can see where the gasket's poking out because the whole thing is sort of deformed. You shouldn't be able to see the gasket because it should be tight up against this surface. So we need to go ahead and get the old fitting out, and then we can bolt our replacement fitting in there. So I'll have to take this coolant line off. I should be able to gently pry that apart. Actually, I'll probably start on this side, so I can pull up on it from this angle. Then we'll work back to the other side. It's the hard part about this is that there's just not a lot of clearance. It might actually be easier to take the fitting off from the other end over here because there's just not a lot of space in here to work. Maybe that's working. Just have to be careful not to break the hose side of the fitting. All right, I'll keep working at this, and when I get it off, I'll bring you guys back when we're ready to bolt the new one on. All right, got the hose disconnected right here. Now I've just got to get the old fitting off. I believe those are an E6. Yes, they are. And I didn't really mention it, but I did look in here to make sure there was no coolant that had leaked out of the fitting. The actual coolant path in it is intact. It's just the outside of the housing itself that's broken, which of course could cause an issue where you might get water from outside into the pack because now it's no longer sealed with that big crack in it. And there's just not really any good way to be able to reliably fix that without just replacing the whole fitting. It's kind of unfortunate that it takes so much work just to replace these things. I mean, as far as Tesla's concerned, in this type of situation where one of these gets broken, their solution is replace the whole pack. Ultimately, what they would do is send the pack back to Fremont for remanufacturing, where they would literally do the same thing. They would take the pack apart, replace the broken fitting, make sure there's no other issues, and then sell it as a remanufactured pack to the next guy, to the tune of probably about 13,000 bucks, somewhere in there. Can I not get that out of here? Clearance is apparently an issue here. All right, I might have to take the plastic housing off the end of the module here. Let's see if I can pop that loose without touching anything. All right, I might need to get some tools to get that off, and there's high voltage under that, so I don't want to go sticking my fingers in there. All right, I got this thing popped loose, so we can just set it back here out of the way. Got our hose right here. Obviously, that's our high voltage bus, so we don't want to be touching that if we can avoid it. I might even want to put on some gloves here, just so I don't have to stick my fingers in it. This is real tight. We might even have to pull this module out of here to get this thing out. That would kind of suck. I'm hoping that we can rotate it or do something. Well, there we go. So I can push it down, sort of underneath. Okay. I can rotate it upside down. Yeah, that still doesn't quite fit. We might actually have to pull this module out of here to get that thing out. But there you can see the bottom of it where it's all busted out right there. So pretty clearly broken. That definitely would not have been sealed. All right, I'll keep working at this and see if I can figure out a way to get this out of here without pulling the module. And if not, then I guess we'll pull the module. All right, so no matter what, no matter which way it gets twisted or turned, this fitting will not fit through here. So we're gonna have to lift this module up in order to get it out. It's real close. We shouldn't have to do very much with it to get it out of there, but there's just no other way. So I've gone ahead and disconnected everything. I've pulled all the bolts out of this side. There's sort of some little clamps underneath this bar that clamp the module in. And then we've got this center spine. This whole thing is going to come out. I've got it fully unbolted. So we're going to pull this center spine out, and then we should be able to pick up this side of the module. And then hopefully we'll be able to get our fitting back out of here and swap it out with our new one. I've already got coolant line undone. I also undid the bus bar here. Just put that over so it's not exposed. But yeah, we'll go ahead and pull the center spine off here and then lift the module out of place. All right, so with a little bit of assistance, I was able to get the new fitting in here. Our old broken fitting is right there. As you can see, busted right in half. We were able to pick up the module and just kind of wedge some bars under it. It's only up maybe 1/4 of an inch, and that was just enough to be able to get this thing in here without having to pull the whole module. As you can see, I did take this coolant tube off that lives right here. That made it a little bit easier. But yeah, I'll go ahead and get this thing screwed in, and we can put the module back down where it belongs and start putting everything back together. Obviously, we'll have to clean off all the old sealant, and then this thing can start going back together. All right, so the new coolant fitting is bolted in here. As you can see, I've got everything reassembled. I've reattached our bus bar, put the coolant hose back on. All that's left to do is to put the center rib in, which I've got right here. So I'm just gonna set this thing in place, get everything bolted back in, and then we can start working on setting up the lid to go back on. We'll have to clean all the old adhesive off the sealing surfaces of both the pack as well as the lid itself. And then once I finish with all that, then we can apply new sealant and get the lid bolted back on here. I've got all of the gasket surfaces cleaned. There were a couple places where I had to touch up with just a little bit of paint where the paint got scraped off and we were down to bare metal. It's actually pretty important to seal all that stuff up because the case is aluminum and the lid is steel. So if you have steel and aluminum touching each other in the presence of moisture, you get dissimilar metal corrosion. So we want that stuff sealed up so it's not gonna have any corrosion issues. I'm gonna go ahead and apply bead of sealant on here and get the lid on. Got to work pretty quick with the sealant because it does start to set up fairly quickly. So probably not going to film too much of that, but I'll come back to you guys once the lid is on. So as you can see, we've got the lid back on. It's actually been a couple days since I actually reinstalled it on here, but I went ahead and put it on. Had to clamp it in a couple spots, particularly here on the back on the ends, just because there's not really anything in the middle to support that. So clamped it together overnight and let it sit so that all the sealant could set up properly. We do still need to reassemble everything in the penthouse area, so we've got to put our PCS and all that other stuff back in, so that's all right here. I was waiting on a couple of other parts, which is why I kind of delayed working on this. Mainly our cables that run from front to back for the AC compressor and PTC heater. So we've got that stuff. The only thing that I'm still waiting on is just kind of an auxiliary piece. We do have an aluminum skid plate to put under the car. Also ordered some fender guards, which I believe should be showing up probably later today, potentially tomorrow, we'll see. But we don't need those to finish the assembly process because those are just sort of a little extra piece for added protection, and hopefully will prevent any issues like this from happening on the future with this car. So let's go ahead and start getting the stuff put together here in the penthouse, and then we should be ready to start reassembling this to get it back into the car. Okay, so we're ready to put our PCS in at this point. At this juncture, it's important to make sure that everything that's connected or needs to be connected is. So we've got all of our fasteners in through the bottom of the enclosure here. We've got our fasteners on all the bus bars that live under the PCS. We've got our serial connector for our cell balancing boards on both sides. This one is really the only important one for now, but I got both plugged in. I actually put this coolant line on beforehand because otherwise this is super difficult to get into place. The one on this side is a little bit easier to get on with the PCS in, and it'll actually be easier to get the PCS in here without it in the way. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the PCS. We'll drop it in. I've got a couple just suction cup handles on it that make it easier to handle. So let me grab that here real quick, and we'll just drop it right into place. So we should be able to just, I find that if I drop it in with that edge under first, well, no, because we need to get under the coolant line here. There we go. Yeah, fitment in here is the tough part because it's pretty tight. There we go. I think we're in. We're not stuck on anything. Good. So I can go ahead and attach this coolant hose where it needs to go. Of course, why does that not seem quite right? There we go. Now it's in there. So that coolant hose is on. Let's go ahead and get our fasteners on here. Some of these use 5, some of them use 6, and some of them only use 4. This one only had 4. I need a socket. We should be able to just get these all tightened in. And then our PCS is officially mounted. I did just notice that connector got trapped, but we were able to get that out no problem. Okay. Awesome. So we've got this connector here. It plugs in like so. We've got this connector here that plugs in like that. Our 12-volt harness over here can get attached. just like so. So that's actually our DC to DC output. So that's how the car keeps all the lights and everything on. This is actually a pretty early pack, so the newer packs actually use a totally different design for this thing. This one is an early revision, we'll say. So that's all that stuff in. Go ahead and pull our suction cups off here. And now I can get to reassembling everything else that belongs in here. So this is our charge port input, which attaches to the bottom of that thing and then goes like so. Awesome, we've got that. We can get our coolant hose right here, which runs back here. Give it a little twist around. Actually, before I put that on, let's go ahead and attach our charge port stuff here. Otherwise it gets in the way. There should not be any energy here, but we'll go ahead and just do that. Sweet. So we've got our cover here. That just snaps right on here. I have that right. This one might not actually fit. I might have to grab a different one. The original one was broken. I grabbed one off of a newer car, but I think it's a different piece that fits there. So let me grab the correct one. And yeah, I'll just continue reassembly here. And we should have this together in no time. So the entire penthouse area is fully reassembled. We've got the HVP in. Of course, we have the PCS in. I've got all the covers on. Everything's bolted in, connected. We're good to go. All that's left to do is to put the cover back on, just like so. I'll go ahead and get this all bolted down. And then at this point, we're pretty much ready to put this thing in the car. I think all that's really left to do is just to get the coolant hoses and stuff on. And then we should be ready to install. Alrighty, we can go ahead and get our fresh coolant hoses on the front here, since our original ones were completely destroyed. The rest of the hoses were totally fine. It's just the ones at the front of the pack here that need to be replaced. And of course, this is where it broke, is right where this fitting attaches to the one that we replaced. I have to say, one nice thing about these hoses is if you get the metal latches snapped in, you just push until it clicks. And then you know you're connected. You don't have to fuss around with them all that much. And then this side, I'm actually going to leave disconnected because we have to pass the cables up behind this. So that I'm going to leave off for now. I'm just going to kind of set it right there. But we should be able to get the pack in the car at this point. And then we can get our cables set up on the bottom rail. And hopefully we'll be able to get this thing started shortly. Alrighty, I got all the rest of the coolant hoses on both sides, where they attach to the back and everything. We're pretty much ready to get this thing bolted in. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And I'll come back to you guys once we've got the pack in the car and we're ready to start reassembling everything that goes on the bottom. All right, there we go. Pack is fully installed in the car once again. We've just got a couple things we need to hook up for coolant lines. Obviously, we need to get our center spine down here with the cables that run through it, and hook up our cables to the drive units and everything. And we'll go through all of our reset processes with Toolbox, which we really shouldn't have to do very much. We might have to clear the isolation counter because of those these busted up cables on the front here, which we're going to go ahead and get those swapped out. Where was it busted up? Oh yeah, right there. So that one's bad. And this one, I think, kind of got nicked just right here at the base where it goes into the plastic casing there. So we're gonna go ahead and get those swapped out on this thing. And then we should be able to get this rail installed in the car again. Let's go. So on either end of this center rail, we've just got this little piece that kind of snaps in to retain the cables into place. I think we just kind of pull up and then pull it out this way. And you can see we've got a lot of dirt and stuff jammed in here, so I might actually pull both the smaller ancillary cables out as well as potentially the bigger ones, and I might actually just hose this thing out, clean out all the road grime and dirt from it, and then we'll reassemble it with our replacement cables, and then we should be good to install. All right, so I got our center rail all cleaned up here. Let's go ahead and reinstall our main high voltage cables here. Just let those lean on that side. So over here, we've got these little plastic pieces that are zip tied on. Those just go right at the end of the center portion of the rail here, and then the cables themselves just kind of push into position. There's not really much that actually holds them in other than just a little bit of friction where this electrical tape is wound around them. So they're just kind of a push fit to go in there. And then once I get this one in, we'll go ahead and get our smaller ancillary cables installed, which of course were the real problem area here. All right, I think we're good there. So let's get these. This has been coiled up in a box, so hopefully we don't have any problems, but we should be able to do the same exact thing. So these are labeled with two different colors of tape. One side's got orange tape, the other side has black tape. The orange tape goes towards the positive side, the black tape goes towards the negative side. Obviously there's a negative and positive in both of these, but I'm talking about which side the main cables are. And these are the same way. We're just going to line the zip tie up with kind of the end of the rail there. And then these just kind of push in sort of sideways. Like so. So you just push it in there and then sort of give it a little twist to get it into place. So on the cables where they come out of the front here, you may have noticed I didn't install the little plastic shield on them. I actually did that on purpose because I wanted to make sure that we could get them in here and make sure this lines up properly. So I'm actually gonna insert this onto its little clips where it goes on. We'll get the cables assembled in here so that they're laid into this thing where they belong. And then I'll snap the front piece of it together so that we have everything where it needs to go. Okay, I think we got all those on, so now we can just take the front piece and snap it into place, just like so. And then, of course, now the whole thing just pops off like it's supposed to. And then our two sets of cables here just plug in to their respective connectors. And boom. And then, of course, our big ones will plug into the motor there. We can put this coolant hose back where it belongs, just like so. And then right over here, we've actually got our main coolant inlet for the battery. So this one can also get pushed into place, just like that. And I'll continue connecting up all of the rest of the coolant hoses, like this one over here. We've got more over there, bunch on the back, all of our cables. I'll go to all that stuff connected, and then we'll probably go to the vacuum refill, and then we should be able to start the car up. So everything's connected, batteries bolted in, mostly. I went ahead and did a vacuum fill on the cooling system. It's not fully refilled, but I think I got a good 2.5 or 3 gallons in there. Should be enough to hopefully at least get the coolant air purge routine started. So I think we're ready to get this thing started up. Let's go ahead and reconnect our 12-volt battery here. See if we get any signs of life. I hear contactors, so that's a good sign. Let's go ahead and hop in the car here and see if we can get it to boot up. Obviously, the interior still needs to be put back together. But if I peel back the carpet there a little bit, I can just get my foot in here. Come on. Will the car boot up? All right, I'll come back to you guys when it finally wakes up. Oh, never mind. There we go. Power reduced. Okay, that's not awesome. What do we have? DC to DC rationality. Not supporting low voltage bus. Isolation degradation. Okay, that's not awesome. We do still get drive. Well. Oh, and now it is supporting the low voltage bus? No? But we did get that alert. So we no longer have a loss of isolation, but we still have a DC to DC issue apparently. What would be up with that? Our DC to DC outputs should be connected back here. Oh, sorry. So they're connected right there. I don't know if we've got an internal issue or if we've got something else going on here, but yeah, I guess we'll have to do some investigation here and see what's up. Charger output voltage, sensed value on CAN. Okay. Well, let's go over here. High voltage, HV system. Okay, that looks fine. PCS by an excessive amount. Interesting. Okay, I wonder if we have some other issue going on here. High pyro disconnected squib resistance. Oh, do we have a pyro issue? Interesting. Okay, well, take a look and see what we got going on. But it appears that we have... Let's see, we'll turn that back off. Interesting. Well, I'll continue to see what we got going on here and figure out what the problem is. Okay, so I did some investigation. I found out what the cause of the problem was, and it was kind of my own fault. The DC to DC converter in the PCS actually got just a little bit of coolant into this connector when I was pulling everything apart, and it actually caused an internal short. So I swapped the PCS out with a good one, did a firmware redeploy, and we're all good. We no longer have any alerts present in service mode on the car, other than just some occupant sensors and stuff, since obviously the back seat is out. So it's time to go ahead and get this thing reassembled. And then once we've got it all put back together, we'll be able to take it on a test drive, make sure the coolant's purged, make sure that it charges, does everything that it should do, and then it should be ready for pickup. Okay, so we've got everything reassembled in the rear. We've got the rear under tray installed. Everything's bolted in where it needs to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and install our front under tray, which we're upgrading to an aluminum skid plate. Hopefully avoid these types of issues happening in the future on this car. Sweet, so now we've got a solid aluminum skid plate there. So that hopefully if they ever run over anything else on the road, they won't end up with the same problem. This is cheap insurance to prevent damage to the front of the battery. So one of these things is well worth it. They're not that expensive. They're definitely a good investment to have. And additionally, just for some extra protection, I've got some wheel liner guards. So these protect the, there's another coolant fitting on each corner of the battery right behind the wheel liner here.
if you run over something that gets sucked up by the wheel, it'll push it right up into the wheel well there and damage that. That's another one I've seen before. So these just bolt on like so. So we get one fastener there, one fastener here. The one back here, normally there's not a bolt that would go in there. Originally it would have been just a clip. There's a little threaded clip that goes with these things. It just goes over that tab, so it just looks like so. You just want to be careful. Sometimes these kits come with bolts that are a little on the long side, and you don't want a bolt that's so long that it actually hits the coolant line. Sweet. So now we've got some additional underbody protection here. Protect this thing from road debris. And now we can just put together the interior, and then this car should be good to go. Alrighty, we're in the car here, ready to go. Pretty much everything's reassembled. Just have the rocker moldings there to get back on the car. But we're gonna go ahead and test drive this and make sure everything's good. So we'll make it out to the street here, and I'll come back to you guys once we're on the road. Alright, we're hitting the road here. Make sure we don't have any issues. Seems like we're all good so far. We'll just take it for a good little spin around the block, and then when I get back to the shop, I'll probably plug it in, make sure it charges properly. I haven't tested this actual PCS to make sure it charges at the full 48 amps. I don't have a 48 amp charger, but I do have a 40 amp charger, which will at least let us know that all of the sections in it are working properly, because they're 16 amps apiece. So yeah, continue on with my drive, and hopefully it goes uneventfully and we can finish this thing up. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing plugged in, make sure it charges the way that it should. Let's see. Let's go back to, there we go. So we are charging, it's going 16, ramping up. Make sure we don't have any alerts on our PCS here. And there we go. Once we've surpassed 32, that means that we're good. All three of our sections in the PCS are working. So we're good to go there. Yeah, so I've just got to get everything buttoned up, and then this thing's ready to go. Alrighty folks, well that's a wrap on this Model 3 pack repair. Obviously, road debris can certainly be an issue. This is actually more common of a problem than you might think. I actually get a fair number of inquiries from folks encountering this exact same issue. And yeah, as far as Tesla's concerned, their only fix for it that they would be able to do would be to replace the whole pack. Obviously, on this car, this is a 2018 with about 90 some odd thousand miles on it, almost 100,000. And the owner didn't want to spend the $14,000 it would cost to put a pack in. Potentially they could have made an insurance claim. I'm not sure what kind of insurance they have on this car, if it's full coverage or not, but that would obviously raise your insurance rates pretty substantially. But yeah, I was able to repair it for a fraction of the cost. The only thing is, because they brought it to Tesla and Tesla saw it first, they actually basically made the customer sign a waiver stating that they would be disabling supercharging on the car until such time that Tesla performs a high voltage safety inspection on it. So the customer will probably have to go and get a high voltage safety inspection done in order to re-enable supercharging. We'll see. It might just work without doing that, but they might have to get a high voltage safety inspection done. But yeah, the underbody covers, so the under tray skid plate as well as the fender liner covers are pretty cheap insurance to protect yourself against these issues. So that's something that I would recommend any Model 3 or Model Y owner to at least consider installing on the car. The front ones are certainly the most important. Rear doesn't really matter so much. But they do make rear ones. And you can find them anywhere. There's lots of them on Amazon, eBay. There's several different sort of Tesla aftermarket companies that produce different options for them. But they're out there and pretty widely available, and certainly not too difficult to find. But anyways, that's a wrap for this one. And thanks for watching.